At German 7th Army headquarters in Le Mans, France, SS Obergruppenführer Paul Hauser sat examining intelligence reports on July 20, 1944, struggling to make sense of what he was reading. Hauser had recently replaced General Oberst Friedrich Dollmann, and 6 weeks into the Allied invasion, the numbers coming across his desk seemed impossible. Wehrmacht logistics doctrine couldn't explain what the Americans were accomplishing. His intelligence briefing contained margin notes that would eventually surface in captured German archives, scrawled observations that revealed his bewilderment. He noted that Americans had field bakeries operating just 15 kilometers from active combat zones, writing that this represented either sophisticated propaganda or a complete revolution in military supply that the Wehrmacht simply didn't understand. German intelligence had been collecting data through intercepted radio communications and forward observer reports, documenting something that contradicted everything the Wehrmacht had learned over 4 years of warfare. While American soldiers remained locked in brutal hedgerow combat throughout Normandy, they were somehow receiving far more than just ammunition and fuel. Hot meals arrived at the front. Fresh bread came daily. Mail from home reached soldiers in combat zones. One report that German officers found particularly incredible described donuts being served by women in Red Cross uniforms. The first of these Red Cross Club mobiles had landed just 4 days earlier on July 16th. These converted trucks, staffed by American women volunteers, had apparently been considered important enough to justify precious shipping capacity across the Atlantic Ocean. For the Wehrmacht, which had systematically stripped even basic comforts from its soldiers in pursuit of operational efficiency, dedicating resources to troop morale seemed like absolute madness from a military perspective. German commanders hadn't yet grasped what they were actually witnessing. This wasn't American extravagance or wasteful allocation of resources. It was American industrial logic being applied to warfare itself. The capacity to deliver comfort items to troops under fire demonstrated something far more significant than concern for morale. An army capable of providing donuts in combat zones could obviously provide unlimited ammunition as well. German confidence regarding American logistical weakness had developed over several years. Wehrmacht intelligence had carefully analyzed American military doctrine since 1940, and their assessments consistently expressed dismissal. The Foreign Army's West Intelligence Section under Oberst Alexis von Rohen regularly reported that American dependence on material comfort represented a critical vulnerability. The mathematics appeared to validate German assumptions. American military planning documents captured from a destroyed glider in Sicily revealed that US forces required approximately 45 pounds of supplies per soldier daily. Wehrmacht allocations ranged from 9.3 pounds when inactive to 20 pounds during normal operations. German commanders who had survived on far less during Russian campaigns viewed this disparity as clear evidence of American weakness. General Feldmarschall Gerd von Rundstedt, serving as Commander-in-Chief West, had articulated typical Wehrmacht thinking during a May 1944 staff conference. According to post-war testimony from his Chief of Staff, General Gunther Blumentritt, von Rundstedt stated that Americans required 3 times German supply tonnage and believed war was fundamentally a matter of material. The Germans had proven in Russia, he argued, that will triumphs over material, and when the elaborate American supply system encountered the friction of warfare, it would inevitably collapse. This perspective wasn't mere propaganda, but reflected genuine German military philosophy. Wehrmacht doctrine emphasizing Auftragstactic prioritized initiative, improvisation and austerity. German soldiers received training to live off the land, operate independently when isolated from supply lines, and continue fighting without regular resupply. The American insistence on maintaining supply chains for items Germans considered luxuries like chocolate, cigarettes, and writing paper seemed to validate Nazi propaganda regarding democratic decadence. Wehrmacht logistics officers had calculated what they believed was the mathematical impossibility of American plans. According to captured German documents, Major Heinrich von Stülpnagel from Army Group B's supply staff had presented analysis demonstrating that supplying 12 divisions across open beaches would require 8,400 tons daily. No military force in history had achieved even half this tonnage without established ports, and the Americans claimed they would accomplish this while under enemy fire. It was, in German assessment, mathematically impossible. What German intelligence failed to comprehend was the sheer scale of American preparation. For 2 years, the United States had been transforming Britain into what General Eisenhower described as one gigantic military base. By June 1944, Americans and British had stockpiled 2.5 million tons of supplies, enough to fill a freight train stretching from London to Edinburgh and back again. The invasion fleet crossing on June 6 represented the largest naval operation in human history, consisting of 6,939 vessels, including 4,126 landing craft. Beyond these numbers lay innovations German planners hadn't imagined possible. Among the specialized vessels were LSTs converted into floating kitchens, complete with ranges and ovens capable of baking fresh bread while crossing the English Channel. U.S. Navy records document that LST-357 had been modified with refrigeration units maintaining 32-degree temperatures during the Channel crossing. LST-391 carried a complete field bakery designed to be operational within hours of beaching. These weren't emergency modifications made under pressure, but planned allocations of resources that German doctrine would have automatically classified as wasteful. German E-boat patrols encountering invasion convoys reported observations that puzzled them. Korvettenkapitän Friedrich Hoffmann, commanding E-boat flotilla S-130, noted in his war diary that he had observed unusual vessels in Allied convoys that appeared to be modified merchant ships painted military grey, their purpose unknown but emanating smoke similar to factory vessels. By June 26, 1944, 20 days after the invasion, American logistics had achieved what German doctrine deemed impossible. Despite ongoing combat and lacking a single major port, Americans were landing an average of 15,000 tons of supplies daily. Quartermaster Corps records show that by this date, mobile bakeries were operational at both Omaha and Utah beaches, each producing 60,000 pounds of fresh bread daily. This wasn't the hard biscuit German troops subsisted on, but fresh white and whole wheat bread, baked overnight and distributed to frontline units each morning. German intelligence officers couldn't reconcile their observations with their understanding of warfare. Hauptmann Franz Gochel, serving as intelligence officer with the 352nd Infantry Division, reported to his superiors on June 28 in documents captured from his headquarters. He noted that American soldiers in forward positions were receiving packaged meals containing canned meat, vegetables, crackers, candy and cigarettes. Each meal contained more variety than German troops had seen in months. American soldiers were discarding half-eaten rations that German soldiers would have considered feast items. The speed of American supply establishment defied all Wehrmacht experience. By June 30th, Americans had landed 71,000 vehicles, 448,000 tons of supplies, and established 97 supply dumps across the beachhead. The German invasion of Norway in 1940, conducted against minimal opposition through captured ports, had required 3 weeks to achieve comparable tonnage levels. German dismissal of American logistics capabilities extended to the artificial harbours known as mulberries. Wehrmacht intelligence had identified components being constructed in British ports through aerial reconnaissance, but German naval assessment remained dismissive. Admiral Friedrich Ruger, serving as Rommel's naval advisor, had briefed Army Group B on May 20th regarding the possibility of artificial harbours, according to his post-war memoirs. He stated that while the concept was theoretically possible, it was practically limited. Atlantic storms and channel tides would restrict any temporary structure to minimal capacity, with German estimates of maximum throughput around 1,000 tons daily under ideal conditions. By June 18th, the American Mulberry A at Omaha Beach was operational, initially handling 3,000 tons daily before ramping up to 7,000 tons, 7 times German estimates. The harbour consisted of 600,000 tons of concrete in caissons, 180,000 tons of steel, and floating roadways that could accommodate 2,000 vehicles daily. German observers were stunned by the engineering achievement they witnessed. Oberst Hans von Luck, whose 21st Panzer Division operated near the British Mulberry Bee, later wrote in his memoirs about watching through field glasses as an entire harbour materialised from nothing. Ships unloaded directly onto floating roads that adjusted with the tides. Trucks drove from ship to shore without stopping. In 1 week, the Allies had created port facilities exceeding many established French harbours. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. The Mulberries represented not just logistics capability, but engineering dominance. If Americans could build harbours from nothing, German soldiers wondered, what couldn't they accomplish? July 16, 1944, marked a watershed moment in military logistics history that German commanders would later identify as psychologically devastating. The first Red Cross Clubmobile arrived on French soil. The vehicle, nicknamed Daniel Boone, landed at Utah Beach and within hours was serving fresh donuts and hot coffee to combat troops. German intelligence initially dismissed reports of women serving refreshments near front lines as propaganda. Oberst Friedrich von Mellenthin, intelligence officer with Panzer Group West, noted in his July 20th assessment that reports of American women operating mobile canteens in combat zones were either false or indicated American command incompetence endangering civilians. But the reports were entirely accurate. Within a week of the first arrival, 12 clubmobiles were operating across Normandy. These GMC trucks, specially modified with donut-making equipment, coffee urns and serving windows, could produce 2,000 donuts and 500 gallons of coffee daily. The 3-woman crews worked within range of German artillery, following combat units as they advanced. American soldier letters captured by German intelligence revealed the impact these services had on morale. Private James Morrison of the 4th Infantry Division wrote home on July 22nd in a letter found on his body after the St. Lo battle. He told his mother she wouldn't believe it, but yesterday he had fresh donuts and real coffee served by American girls, just like at the corner shop back home. They were maybe 5 miles from the front, he wrote, with Germans shelling the road behind them, while these girls joked and served donuts like it was a church social. By August 25, 1944, as American forces liberated Paris, German logistics officers faced an equation they couldn't solve. The US Third Army under General Patton was advancing so rapidly that Wehrmacht doctrine insisted it must halt for resupply. German experience from Russia had proven that mechanized forces couldn't operate more than 200 miles from supply bases without operational pause. General der Panzertruppe Heinrich Eberbach's assessment to OKW on August 24th, found in captured German archives, stated that American spearheads were 400 miles from their beaches. By every calculation, they must halt within 48 hours for supply accumulation. Their fuel consumption alone exceeded possible delivery capacity. 24 hours later, German reconnaissance reported something unprecedented. An endless stream of trucks moving on designated one-way highways, operating around the clock. The Red Ball Express had begun, and it would shatter German understanding of logistics possibilities. The verified statistics of the Red Ball Express defied German comprehension. Nearly 6,000 trucks, operated by 23,000 drivers, delivered 12,342 tons of supplies daily at peak, achieved August 29th. The trucks ran constantly on a 700-mile round-trip route, with drivers changed like relay racers and vehicles serviced while rolling. Transportation Corps records show that 75% of the drivers were African-American soldiers, segregated into trucking companies but proving essential to Allied victory. These units maintained a tempo German logistics officers calculated as impossible. Trucks averaged 240 miles per day, operating on 4 hours of sleep per driver. German logistics doctrine, refined through years of continental warfare, established clear mathematical limits for military operations. Wehrmacht tables captured at various locations showed their calculations. A mechanized division required 300 tons of supplies daily in combat, 100 tons when static. Delivery capacity decreased 30% for every 100 kilometers from supply bases. Beyond 300 kilometers, sustained offensive operations became mathematically impossible according to their models. The Americans shattered every assumption. By September 1944, they were delivering 20,000 tons daily to forces operating 500 miles from the beaches. A single American armored division was consuming 750 tons daily and receiving it. First Army alone was burning 800,000 gallons of gasoline daily, more than the entire Wehrmacht Western Front weekly allocation. General Major Fritz Bayerlein, commanding the remnants of Panzer Lehr Division, made a bitter assessment in a letter to his wife found after his capture. He wrote that they were not fighting soldiers anymore, but an industrial process. The Americans didn't defeat them in battle, but overwhelmed them with trucks. September 1944 brought reports German engineers refused to believe. American forces were constructing fuel pipelines from the invasion beaches directly to advancing armies. The pipeline under the ocean, known as Pluto, and its land extensions seemed like fantasy to Wehrmacht officers who struggled to maintain fuel levels in static positions. The first Pluto line became operational September 22nd, initially delivering 56,000 gallons daily to Cherbourg. By October, with multiple lines operational, delivery reached 300,000 gallons daily. By March 1945, the system would achieve its full capacity of 1 million gallons daily, exceeding the fuel consumption of entire German army groups. The psychological impact on German defenders was devastating. Oberst Hermann Balck, considered one of Germany's finest tactical commanders, noted in his post-war interrogation that when they learned Americans were pumping fuel directly from England to their tanks, they knew the war was lost. "You cannot defeat an enemy who eliminates geography," he stated. "Nothing demonstrates American logistics supremacy more dramatically than Thanksgiving 1944. With armies stretched from Holland to Switzerland, the Quartermaster Corps attempted something unprecedented, serving traditional Thanksgiving dinner to every American soldier in Europe, nearly 2 million men on the same day. General der Panzertruppe Hasso von Manteuffel, secretly preparing the Ardennes offensive, received intelligence reports he initially dismissed. His G2 intelligence summary for November 20th, discovered in captured records, stated that agents reported massive shipment of frozen turkeys to American forces, which appeared to be a deception operation to hide offensive preparations. It wasn't deception. The cargo ship SS Great Republic had departed New York on October 15th with 1,604 tons of frozen turkey, arriving at Le Havre on November 16th. Additional shipments brought cranberry sauce, sweet potatoes, pumpkins, and all traditional accompaniments. Special refrigerated trains and trucks maintained the cold chain from port to front lines. On November 23, 1944, American soldiers in foxholes facing the Siegfried Line ate turkey with stuffing, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and pumpkin pie. Units under sporadic German artillery fire were served hot meals. The 30th Infantry Division, holding defensive positions near Aachen, received complete dinners despite German shelling. The psychological warfare was unintentional but devastating. Captured American soldiers interrogated after Thanksgiving consistently mentioned the meal, inadvertently revealing American supply capabilities to increasingly demoralized German interrogators. The winter of 1944–45 was the coldest in 50 years. German commanders, remembering Wehrmacht collapse in Russian winters, expected American forces to suffer similarly. The Ardennes offensive was partly predicated on American inability to rapidly supply winter equipment to exposed forces. Instead, the Americans launched emergency supply operations, delivering 2 million sets of winter clothing in 3 weeks. The shipment included innovations unknown to German forces: layered cold-weather clothing systems, shoe packs with removable felt liners, sleeping bags rated to -30 Fahrenheit, and portable squad stoves. General der Infanterie Baptist Knies, commanding 85th Corps, reported to Army Group B in December 1944 from captured records that American troops in Bastogne were receiving airdropped supplies despite complete encirclement. Containers included medical supplies, ammunition, winter clothing, and mail. Their own troops, supplied from their own depots, lacked basic winter equipment. The Bastogne airlift demonstrated American logistics flexibility. C-47 transport aircraft dropped 1,446 tons of supplies in 8 days to the surrounded 101st Airborne Division. Color-coded parachutes identified contents: red for ammunition, blue for medical supplies, yellow for food, white for winter clothing. The precision and volume of air supply exceeded total German airborne resupply capabilities for the entire Western Front. March 1945 brought the Rhine crossing, Germany's last major natural barrier. Wehrmacht doctrine, based on their own 1940 operations, required extensive preparation for major river crossings. German estimates suggested Americans would need 3 weeks to accumulate bridging equipment and supplies. General Oberst Johannes Blaskowitz informed OKW on March 1 that the Rhine barrier would provide time to reorganize defenses. 7 days later, the 9th Armoured Division captured the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen intact. Within 24 hours, American engineers had reinforced the damaged structure and were running 1,000 vehicles per hour across it. But Remagen was just the beginning. American engineers constructed 62 bridges across the Rhine in 10 days, a bridge every 4 hours. The longest, a 1,100-foot floating treadway bridge at Oppenheim, was operational in 10 hours. These weren't temporary expedients, but engineered crossings capable of handling 70-ton tank transporters. Major Klaus Weber, an engineer officer observing at Mainz, later testified that Americans threw bridges across the Rhine like ladders across a stream. Each bridge had its own traffic control, maintenance crew, and anti-aircraft defense. They built redundancy into everything. If Germans destroyed one bridge, 2 others were already handling its traffic. By May 8, 1945, VE Day, American logistics achievements defied every precedent in military history. The Transportation Corps and Quartermaster Corps had delivered to combat forces in Europe 21 million jerry cans, 570,000 GMC 2.5-ton trucks, 2.4 billion individual rations, 800 million cigarette packs, 500 million candy bars, 50 million Hershey bars, 11 billion rounds of ammunition. Monthly consumption rates by March 1945 reached 1.2 million tons of supplies, 50 million gallons of gasoline, and 8,000 tons of ammunition daily during offensives. These numbers represented more than statistics. They represented a fundamental revolution in warfare. The Wehrmacht, which prided itself on operational excellence, discovered that tactical brilliance meant nothing against unlimited industrial capacity efficiently delivered. Post-war interrogations of German commanders revealed unanimous recognition of American logistics supremacy. These assessments, compiled by the U.S. Army Historical Division, provide the most credible evidence of German reactions. General Feldmarschall Albert Kesselring, one of Germany's most capable commanders, testified at his 1947 interrogation that American supply achievements exceeded their calculations by factors of 5 to 10. They based defensive plans on assumed American limitations that didn't exist. A German division at 50% supply was considered combat-ready, while American divisions wouldn't attack without 200% supply reserves. General Heinz Guderian, father of Blitzkrieg warfare, provided perhaps the most insightful analysis in his post-war writings. Germans brought tactical innovation to modern war, he wrote. Rapid movement, combined arms, decisive action. The Americans brought something more powerful, the ability to sustain operations indefinitely through unlimited supply. Germans could win battles, Americans could feed armies. History shows which mattered more. General Franz Halder, former chief of the German General Staff, offered a philosophical assessment during his work with the U.S. Army Historical Division. The American approach represented a conceptual revolution Germans didn't understand. They saw logistics as supporting operations, while Americans saw operations as the delivery mechanism for logistics. They didn't defeat the German army, they buried it in abundance. While German commanders focused on European operations, Japanese military assessments reached identical conclusions about American logistics supremacy. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto had predicted before Pearl Harbor that Japan could run wild for 6 months, then American industrial capacity would overwhelm them. General Yoshijiro Umezu, Japanese Chief of Staff, provided complementary testimony. They studied American island-hopping tactics, searching for weakness, and found none because tactics were secondary. Americans established supply bases delivering more materials 5,000 miles from America than Japan could deliver 50 miles from Japan. Every battle was decided before it began, in factories and cargo ships. This specific validation matters because it demonstrates the universal nature of American logistics revolution. Whether fighting in European hedgerows or Pacific atolls, American forces maintained supply superiority that redefined military possibility. American logistics success stemmed from innovations that seemed mundane individually but revolutionary collectively. Standardization meant every American vehicle used interchangeable parts. A truck damaged in Italy could be repaired with parts from France. German forces, using equipment from multiple conquered nations, faced constant compatibility crises. Mechanization was another key factor. While Germany relied on 750,000 horses for transport, consuming 20,000 tons of fodder monthly, Americans used trucks exclusively, eliminating an entire supply category while increasing speed and capacity. Preservation represented another innovation. American forces pioneered military refrigeration, maintaining cold chains from America to front lines. Fresh meat, blood plasma, and medicines arrived in condition impossible for other armies. Communication infrastructure was equally important. Americans laid 100,000 miles of telephone wire in France alone, enabling real-time supply coordination. German forces relied heavily on motorcycle couriers, delaying supply response by days. Specialization meant Americans created purpose-built vehicles for every supply category: refrigerated trucks, fuel tankers, ammunition carriers, recovery vehicles. Germans used generic vehicles for all purposes, reducing efficiency by half. An overlooked dimension of American logistics success was female participation. While German ideology confined women to traditional roles, 150,000 American women served in the Women's Army Corps, with thousands directly supporting logistics operations. WAC officers commanded supply depots, controlling more personnel than most German regiment commanders. Post-war reports noted that WAC personnel processed 40% of all supply documentation in the European theatre of operations, freeing thousands of men for combat while improving logistics efficiency through specialized training. This gender integration doubled American military effectiveness by utilizing population resources Germany ideologically rejected. American logistics superiority became an unintentional but devastating form of psychological warfare. German soldiers who hadn't seen chocolate since 1942 could smell it on American POWs. Wehrmacht units surviving on sawdust extended bread could hear American troops complaining about monotonous K rations that contained more variety than German soldiers had seen in years. Captured German letters revealed the impact. Gefreiter Wilhelm Hoffmann wrote to his wife in December 1944 in a letter found in a destroyed bunker. The Americans they captured were better fed as prisoners than Germans were as soldiers. They threw away half-eaten chocolate bars and used white bread for cleaning their rifles. They were fighting the entire wealth of America. This demoralization extended to German commanders. General der Infanterie Hans Schmidt testified in 1947 that his soldiers fought courageously despite overwhelming odds, but when they discovered Americans were receiving ice cream and mail while Germans lacked ammunition and medical supplies, morale collapsed. You cannot maintain fighting spirit against such disparity. German officers who witnessed American logistics capacity weren't surprised when the Marshall Plan was announced in 1947. They had observed American to deliver unlimited resources across impossible distances. The nation that could supply armies across oceans could certainly rebuild a continent. General Lucius Clay, military governor of the American occupation zone, employed former Wehrmacht logistics officers to help manage German reconstruction. Their experience with American supply methods proved invaluable. Colonel Hans von Greifenberg, former Chief of Staff to Army Group Center, worked with American administrators and later noted that Americans applied the same logistics principles to peace that won the war: standardization, mechanization, communication, and abundance. The Marshall Plan was military logistics redirected to civilian reconstruction. When North Korea invaded South Korea in June 1950, American forces initially struggled tactically. But within weeks, American logistics dominance reasserted itself. Former Wehrmacht officers serving as NATO advisors observed the repetition of patterns they had witnessed from 1944 to 1945. General Adolf Heusinger, Wehrmacht operations chief who became chairman of the NATO Military Committee, noted that in Korea, Americans again demonstrated that modern war is won by supply superiority. They delivered more tonnage to Pusan in 3 months than Germany delivered to Stalingrad in 2 years. Communist forces might win battles, but they cannot match American logistics. Harvard Business School began studying World War II American military logistics in the 1960s as the foundation of modern supply chain management. Professor Theodore Levitt identified direct lineage from military innovations to business practices. Containerization, just-in-time delivery, computerized inventory, total quality management all originated in American military logistics from 1945. The same principles that delivered supplies to Normandy beaches later delivered global commerce, cementing American economic dominance for decades. Despite being allies, Soviet commanders were equally stunned by American logistics capabilities. Marshal Georgy Zhukov, who received American Lend-Lease supplies, wrote in classified memoirs released after 1991 that Americans delivered 500,000 vehicles to the Soviet Union, more than their entire production. But more impressive was their delivery system. They shipped from Detroit to Vladivostok to Moscow, with precision Soviets couldn't achieve from Moscow to Stalingrad. Marshal Ivan Konev was blunter in private correspondence, stating that if they fought America, they would face not their army, but their factories. Americans could deliver more supplies to the opposite side of Earth than Soviets could deliver to their borders. This wasn't military superiority, but industrial transcendence. American logistics success in World War II required processing unprecedented information volumes. The punch-card systems managing military supplies, operated largely by WAC personnel, represented the largest data processing operation in history to that point. IBM machines tracked millions of items from factory to foxhole. Every bullet, bandage and boot was coded, counted and tracked. This military requirement drove computer development that would define the post-war era. Thomas Watson Jr., IBM president and former Army Air Forces officer, stated that military logistics requirements created the market and technology for business computing. The information age began in quartermaster depots. To understand the revolution American logistics represented, consider Normandy supply statistics compared to previous operations. The German invasion of France in 1940 achieved 3,000 tons daily average across established rail networks, faced supply crisis by day 20 despite captured French stocks, and horse-drawn supply columns averaged 12 miles daily. American operations in Normandy during 1944 achieved 15,000 tons daily average across open beaches, continuous expansion through day 90, and motorized supply columns averaged 240 miles daily. This five-fold increase in tonnage combined with 20-fold increase in delivery speed created operational tempo Germany couldn't match. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, often critical of American tactical methods, delivered the definitive assessment in his memoirs. American logistics was a war-winning weapon more decisive than any secret weapon Germany developed. They could execute any strategy because they could supply any operation. The Allies had to design strategies around logistics limitations. This freedom of action purchased through industrial abundance was America's greatest military advantage. Winston Churchill, with characteristic eloquence, summarized that Americans demonstrated that in modern war the factory is mightier than the fortress, the supply line stronger than the front line. Their monument isn't battles won, but abundance delivered under fire. Charles de Gaulle, protective of French military honor, still acknowledged that Americans conquered not through superior generalship, but through superior supply. This is perhaps more impressive, he noted, because anyone can learn tactics, but who can replicate such industrial capacity? The American logistics revolution permanently transformed warfare. Every subsequent military has faced the same challenge: match American supply capabilities or accept strategic inferiority. The Gulf War, Afghanistan, Iraq all demonstrated the same pattern established in 1944. American forces might face tactical challenges, but logistics supremacy ensures strategic victory. When Operation Desert Storm delivered 500,000 troops to Saudi Arabia, better supplied than Iraqi forces in their own country, it was the World War II logistics revolution refined, not replaced. When American forces in remote Afghan outposts received Thanksgiving dinner in 2001, they were benefiting from systems pioneered on Normandy beaches. On March 7, 1984, the 40th anniversary of Remagen's capture, former General Major Rudolf Langhauser, who had commanded bridge defences, stood with former Captain George Gibbs, whose company had rushed the span. Langhauser, then 75, made a remarkable admission. They prepared for American tanks, artillery and aircraft, but didn't prepare for American abundance. American logistics defeated them before American soldiers arrived. Any army that can deliver ice cream to front lines while Germans lacked bandages for wounded, such an army cannot be defeated by conventional means. Gibbs, age 73, responded with American pragmatism. They figured any soldier asked to die for his country deserved at least a good meal first. Turned out well-fed soldiers fight better than hungry ones. They shook hands across the memorial, former enemies united in recognition of a truth transcending nationality. In industrial-age warfare, supply superiority is military supremacy. The American genius wasn't inventing new ways to fight, but new ways to deliver. They hadn't revolutionized combat, but revolutionized competition itself. The magnitude of American logistics achievement in Europe can be understood through verified statistics that redefined military possibility. Transportation assets deployed included 570,000 GMC 2.5-ton trucks manufactured, 21 million jerry cans delivered to Europe, 160,000 railway cars shipped or built, 2,000 locomotives delivered, and 62 Rhine bridges constructed in 10 days. Supply throughput achieved included peak daily delivery of 20,000 tons in September 1944, total tonnage delivered of 46.7 million measurement tons, fuel delivered via pipeline of 172 million gallons, telephone wire laid totaling 100,000 miles, and mail delivered of 2.5 billion pieces. The human dimension included 2 million troops supplied continuously, 500,000 vehicles maintained operational, 23,000 Red Ball Express drivers, 150,000 WAC personnel supporting logistics, and 75% of truck drivers being African American. These numbers represent more than statistics. They represent the industrialization of warfare itself. Where German commanders saw military operations supported by logistics, Americans saw logistics operations executed through military means. This conceptual revolution proved more decisive than any tactical innovation. German commanders who scoffed at American supply requirements in 1944 became students of American logistics methods by 1950. The logistics system that delivered destruction with unprecedented efficiency proved equally capable of delivering reconstruction with unprecedented generosity. Their initial dismissal had turned to awe, then respect, and finally adoption. The German military tradition that produced Clausewitz and Moltke, Schlieffen and Guderian ultimately produced its greatest insight through defeat. In the age of industrial warfare, the supply line doesn't support the battle. The supply line is the battle. The Wehrmacht entered World War II believing logistics supported operations. They discovered, catastrophically, that operations simply delivered logistics. The Americans hadn't won through superior fighting, but through superior feeding. They hadn't conquered through tactics, but through trucks. They hadn't triumphed through strategy, but through supply. As General Franz Halder concluded in his final assessment, Germans asked how they could win this battle, while Americans asked how they could supply this army. Germans focused on the operation, while Americans focused on the process. History records who chose correctly. The German commanders who had scoffed at American supply chains in 1943 became their most eloquent witnesses by 1945. They had learned through devastating experience a fundamental truth of modern warfare. In the industrial age, logistics capability doesn't support military power. It is military power. The rest is supply.